learning community. Um, if you're here for best practices for engaging Latinos and the importance of creating partnerships with local media, you're in the right place. So today we are going to hear from Doralicia Garay. I hope I said that right. She is the UCANR social media strategist. She has over 15 years of communications experience, most recently serving as the social media strategist for UCANR, where she leads the strategy for ANR's main channels and works with statewide programs in developing their social media presence. Then we have Ricardo Vela, who is a 35-year broadcast professional. Prior to running Extension, Ricardo worked for the Chicago Tribune and Univision in Chicago. In Texas and Los Angeles, he worked as a national news correspondent for Univision and CNN. So I'm going to hand it over to Ricardo and Doralicia, and welcome and thank you for agreeing to put on this webinar for all of us.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting us and having us here. Yeah, currently myself, I'm working with UCANR as a manager of news and information outreach in Spanish. And Doralicia has been God's blessed sent from heaven in our efforts to reach out to more Latinos in California. So let's start with the presentation. So um, we have enough time for questions and answers at the end. Okay. Let me see. My computer is a little slow today. I don't know why. Okay, let's share the screen. Here we are. Everybody can see the PowerPoint. Everybody can hear me. Wonderful. Okay, first and foremost, what we have to keep in mind and have always visible in our plan and our planning and execution as well is who is my audience and who are the Latinos that we want to cater to, professionals, blue collar, farm workers. Where are they located? In the East Coast, Midwest, Southwest, the West Coast. Um, the reason we have to do all this is because even though we would like to see the Latino community as one, we are not one. We're one huge group, diverse group of people put it into one bag that says Latinos or Hispanic. So it depends on where you are in the country or who your target is. That's exactly where um, you have to tailor to your audience. Latinos in the East Coast, for instance, Miami. Let's talk about Miami, for instance, which is uh, a huge place with Latinos. It's, I think, the third state with the Latino population, and but they're very different. There's a lot of Central Americans, South Americans, Venezuelans, Argentinians, people from Uruguay, Cuba, and Puerto Ricans. And most of them, the majority of them, are professionals, were educated. Cubans and Venezuelans, most of them have, um, when they left their countries, they were mainly very wealthy. So it's a very different scenario there. And right now, Miami is considered like the little Latin America concentration. And if you go to the other extreme in California, you have an array of every single representation of Latin America, Spanish-speaking countries is here. The majority of them um, have been here for a while. We can count fourth, fifth, sixth generation of Latinos. Some of them still speak Spanish, but we're going to speak about that later. If we go to Texas, which is the second largest state, the state with the second largest Latino population, also is very different. In Texas, after the second generation, you grew up thinking first and foremost you're Texan, and then you're American, and then you are whatever ethnicity you belong to, whether if it is Texan American or Texan Asian, whatever. But first and foremost, your mentality is very different in here. New Mexico is another group on which we're going to define them by Native Americans who happen to be Christianized and given Latino surnames, Spanish surnames, but they don't feel and then don't think and then don't want to be think of as Latinos. They feel that everything was imposed to them. It was not them choosing, but they made them with blood and suffering uh, acquire that. So it's a different scenario there. Let's go to the next. The other thing that we have to keep in mind is, and this is always a question, shall we address Hispanic, Latino, Latinx? Um, all of the three are correct. Latinx, the Pew Research Institute just did a study on which 98% of the Latino population across the United States um, don't care about Latinx. Actually, nobody uses it. It's mainly the very new generations who are using it, but most people really don't like it and are not using it. However, if you choose to using it, is always once again who is your audience. Latinx is being used more for younger generations who are in college. Um, so that will be part of your group. Uh, where when it comes to Hispanic or Latino, just ask the communities that you are working or you're going to write to, depending upon uh, the one word I don't suggest to use if you really want to start getting the trust and gaining the trust of the Latino community. Don't use people of color when you refer to Latinos or Hispanics. Uh, you have to be specific. People of colors is so many, it's wrong in so many ways, but people are using it more. And I, for one, I think we should get rid of that term. But anyways, um, so keep in mind that Hispanic, Latino, Latinx is just a preference of the individual or the group where you're working with or you're going to write to. Another thing we have to take out of our minds is unconscious bias. All Latinos speak Spanish. All Latinos are born outside the US, and all Latinos are brown. And normally we refer and we express that when we meet someone who's whiter than me. You go, you don't look Latino. Are you sure you're Mexican? Really, where are you from? When people say, and that happens to me a lot. I was born in Texas. People ask me, but you do have an accent. Really, where are you from? Texas. uh, Sometimes even people say, well, you're not white, you're Mexican, or you're Latino, or you're Hispanic. And I say, well, all depends. My father was born in Italy. My mother was of Jewish descent. My father grew up in Mexico. My grandparents immigrated to Mexico. My mother's family as well. I was born in Texas and grew up in Mexico, so whatever I am, that's what I am. But just keep in mind that identity. Most Hispanics prefer their family country origin, as I was saying, over pan-ethnic terms like, uh, instead of Mexican or Hispanic, they'd rather have Mexican American or Cuban American. When it comes to Hispanic or Latino, as I mentioned before, most don't care, but it's the preference what they people want to be called. I mean, some of us like Hispanics, some others like Latino. Most Hispanics do not see a shared common culture among them. That's what I was mentioning before. Oh my god, my computer is going nuts. Sorry. Okay. Um, and that's what I was saying. We have things in common, but we're not the same. Uh, you are someone from Mexico and someone from Honduras, and you can compare even at the same level of education. The difference are so big. Even someone from the West Coast and the East Coast, or someone from the West Coast in Texas, the totally bringing their upbringing is different. Latinos are split on whether they see themselves as typical American. That was a study that the Pew Research did not long ago, on which most Latinos feel that they're, even though they were born here, they're already third generation. They don't see as typical American because the um, cultural background, the cultural aspect of being Latino is always with us. It doesn't matter how many generations you had been here in the States, and that it could be due to the closeness of Mexico and Central America. Most Hispanics don't see themselves fitting into the standard racial category used by the U.S. Census Bureau, which I mentioned earlier. Um, Another thing that you need to know when you're about to write or outreach to the Latinos is what issues are affecting the community. Most people think, oh, it's easy, immigration, wrong. Um, we at UCANR we did we got a grant, with from ACE last year, and we did a research. We wanted to see how we could connect better with the Latino community and other communities, and we were surprised that actually the issues affecting the Latino community, everybody was COVID. After that, it was very different, but it was mainly um, education, housing, job opportunity, and then it was violence on the streets. Very different from other ethnic groups, but at the same time, they were exactly the same. So be proactive, learn what your community needs are. And once again, the Latinos in Florida might have very different needs than the Latinos in New Mexico or the Latinos in California. So you have to tailor that and what are their priorities. The challenges for the Latinos. This is also on a research that the Pew Institute did, and the Latino Policy on Institute. And one, they found that skin color is seen by Latinos as an important factor affecting their lives. And once again, because within the Latino community, you can find the white to the black purple, and all of them are Latinos. We just did a story about the Afro Latinos and how they feel neglected by the Latino community or the Spanish speaking community. And also they feel neglected by the Black Latinos because they don't connect with them, or with the Black community, because they don't connect, sometimes they don't connect with them. But that they go to the Latino groups where they connect, people see them a little different. So they're like invisible in both ends. Um, Also, is the immigration, the uh, Latinos are projected to make a 22.4% of the U.S. labor force by 2030 and more than 30% by 2060. Yet, we don't see a lot of Latinos in decision making positions. That's the view they have. That's one of the things that they consider main issues in general as a large with the Latino community. There's no one leader that could unify all these diverse Latino groups. So that's part of the problem as well. Um, in summary, create clear, compelling messaging, tailor for target audience, collect information on audience and reach, use data to adjust implementation, develop your materials, and communicate via appropriate channels. And this is what we're going to see next. One of the channels that we have to consider is partnering with either media, community organizations. And why is this important? Because once we connect with a respectable member of the Latino community and is part becomes our ambassador, that person is going to open doors, is going to gain the trust of that community that we want to reach out to. Oftentimes, this is could be through religious groups, not necessarily have to we have to be in accordance to their faith, but we can work together to better those communities as well. Um, and I have one example. We just did campaign to vaccinate, to promote vaccination, COVID vaccinations with indigenous Mexican migrant communities and also with Spanish-speaking communities. And incredibly, organically, this video that you're gonna see got more than uh, by now it's almost 50K views from all over the country, and I'm gonna tell you why in a moment.
Tenemos confianza, ¿no? Y como algunos científicos católicos han manifestado que ellos confían en la buena voluntad de esta vacuna para que disminuyamos pues el efecto de esta pandemia.
The reason was the priest. People were searching by his name. He's a very well-known, loved member of his community, and culturally, he was a person of respect, uh, of trust, and by default, we got that. So that's one of the benefits of working with that. Now, the other thing is, shall we write in English? Shall we communicate in English or Spanish? Not necessarily always has to be in Spanish. Once again, all depends on the audience, the target audience that you are working with. Um, and also, there's cultural approaches to this. For instance, in English, it's assertive, direct, and low context. In Spanish, when we communicate, has to go. Good communicators is a style that is passive, is indirect, and provides high context. And whether we do it in English or Spanish, we have to use this style to to culturally get the message to the Latino community. When in English, which is the Anglo culture, it favors direct communication that is transparent and to the point. What we say closely reflects how we feel, and we do not ask our listeners to read between the lines. Well, in Spanish, one of the most important Latino cultural priorities is maintain good relationships, especially with members of a person support system. Sometimes this means being non-confrontational in speech. So that means that whatever you're going to tell me, as long as I trust you, I'm going to buy it, I'm going to absorb it, and I'm going to say, even if I disagree a little, I'm not going to make a big fuss about it. In the Anglo culture, in English, is very expeditious, that very little context of backstory is given. Well, when in Spanish, and I see myself doing this all the time, we need to use context. In order to get to my point, I need to tell you why, what drove me to that point in moment, or why do I'm making this decision. Where we in here in America, we don't do that. We just go straight to the point. That's one big difference when we're writing to Latinos, whether we do it in English or we do it in Spanish. Also, another thing is reach out Latinos through the media channels they rely on most, and most Latinos rely on traditional media like television and radio for information and entertainment. That was part of the results of the survey that we did at A&R. And also, the other thing that was very relevant was social media. And at this point, I pass the talking button to Dora Alicia, who she's the specialist in social media, and she's going to tell us how engage Latinos through social media.
Gracias, Ricardo. And thank you for having us this afternoon. As always, I'm ready to talk all things social media. And in this case, how we use social media to engage Latinos specifically. Can you advance the slide, please? I am going to be throwing at you a lot of numbers here, but I think we need to, with social media, always base our strategy on analytics, right? So to begin strategizing on how to best use, to reach the Latino community on social media platforms, we have to know where they are. Which are their platforms of choice? As of 2020, the Pew Research Institute tells us that for adults age 18 to 65, YouTube is gold. It's the most engaged social media platforms for Latinos. 85% of this community uses YouTube mainly as a source of entertainment for movies or music, but also especially as of the beginning of the pandemic, they use it for information. And that is where we have an opportunity. We have valuable, credible information to share. As you can see, Facebook follows YouTube at 72%. And I predict that this gap between Instagram and Facebook is only going to continue to close. We are seeing a trend move towards fewer Latinos using Facebook and more moving on to Instagram. That's something that you should keep in mind. Not surprising to see that WhatsApp is at 46%. The messenger feature is crucial for Latinos who are looking to connect, especially with family and friends internationally. I highly suggest you use the platform, especially if you're in an ultra niche community where you can gather contact information. In LinkedIn, at 19%, is a platform that has seen solid growth among Latinos these past few years. I urge you to grow your LinkedIn audience to connect with Latino professionals. So in the best case scenario, we would incorporate all of these platforms into our overall social media strategy. However, we might not have the resources to do so, but at least these numbers tell us where you could focus on. If you maybe want to just use Facebook, if you have a younger audience, you might just want to stick with Instagram. I mean, 52% is pretty strong. Can we advance to the following slide, please? So the data also tells us that Latinos are connected. Recent Nielsen numbers show that 98% of Latinos own a smartphone, compared with 93% among the general population. Daily social media usage is also higher among Latinos, with 52% spending at least an hour or more on social media on a daily basis. Can we advance the slide? We also want to learn why Latinos use social media platforms. Also from Nielsen, the main reason is to keep in touch with family and friends, followed by searching for information about current events. And 37% want to find local information. And again, this is key for those managing accounts in local communities. Take advantage of providing information to those local audiences. And 27% want product and service information. Something to note here, there's a lot of skepticism about reliable factual information in this community, especially having to do with research and science. 86% said that having access to factual information is a concern. And this is something to keep in mind as we create content and link to resources. Let's make sure that they are credible. Can we go to the one before that? Okay, I think it's slide 22.
That was 22.
Okay, so I think we have two slides here, but I'll continue. Once you've determined which platform you'll use to reach Latinos, and if you decide to reach Spanish-speaking Latinos, I suggest that you separate your accounts, meaning that you create a Spanish language account. This is, as you can see here, the Spanish language account for UCANR, and this is managed by Ricardo and his team. Again, the community feels that you understand them and that you're willing to dedicate that time. However, if you don't have the resources to maintain and really engage with your audience, then definitely don't go this route. Keep in mind that you'll need to be prepared to truly serve this community. It's not enough to post the content and not be able to answer the questions properly or to truly engage. Social media, after all, is meant to build relationships with your community and achieve this. You can achieve this if you have fluent speakers on your team. And Ricardo, can we go back to the previous slide, please?
Yeah.
The one we were on right now?
This one?
Yeah, thank you. So the image on the left is also from our Spanish language Instagram page, and again, managed by Ricardo and his team. This is an example of using the correct language and the correct image to reach the Latino community. They are experts in kind of grasping that image that connects with our specific community at ANR. Now, if you don't have the bandwidth to create a Spanish account, you could separate, you create a post in Spanish and just separate them from the English ones. I often see in one single post using two languages, and this throws off the algorithms. And also, it doesn't really allow you to reach those Spanish speakers. Another approach you could take is when you have videos and you don't have the bandwidth to create them in Spanish, you can also add Spanish language subtitles. A big don't for this community is using Spanglish. A recent Facebook study found that 50% of Latinos say they prefer not to mix languages on social media, with some respondents noting that they find it disrespectful. And in the same study, US Latinos told Facebook that they often see copy translated from English to Spanish, copy that's too literal or or translated too loosely. So translations that are too literal make audiences feel like an afterthought. Next slide, please. So in summary, for building your online community on social media, get to know your immediate community. That's something that Ricardo mentioned earlier. Even within certain regions of California, you might find, for example, more Central Americans who are going to care about different topics. So make sure that you get to know them, find where they are so that you can engage with them. And most importantly, on social media, you need to build trust by creating compelling content and answering to those questions in a timely and respectful manner. And ultimately, be ready to engage with the community, whether it's in English or in Spanish. And this is our contact information in case you want to reach either of us. We'd be happy to walk you through any of your questions.
Well, it seems like we went way too fast. We have plenty of time for questions and Q&A if you have any questions. Yes, Chris.
Thanks. This is an awesome presentation. Thank you so much. I'm Chris Branham. I'm with Extension at Oregon State University in Oregon. I have a question about Latinx. So working at a university, we often, especially so I'm on the news and public issues team, we often get things submitted to us from faculty that use the term Latinx. Even one of our signature extension programs is aimed at the Latino community, Juntos, used Latinx, then stopped using Latinx when they found that the families weren't really into it, then started using it again. And sometimes I feel like some of our, especially our community health folks, feel like they are pressured to use the term Latinx because that's an academic faculty lounge term is what we've heard. What do you suggest for what do you suggest? I mean, I know you want to use the language that is the audience is directed to, but what do you suggest are ways to navigate that whole field of telling folks we shouldn't use Latinx in this context?
Well, basically, I mean, you have several tools to do that. The first one is all Spanish-speaking countries have a representative on what is called the Royal Academy of Spanish Language, and they meet every month or every so often, and they go through all the, they add new words to the language that have been in use for most of the countries, and so on and so forth. None of them has approved Latinx. So officially, until that body of regulators who are the maximum authority on the language say no, it's a no. That's not dispute. If you want to speak properly Spanish. However, here in the States, and Latinx is mainly United States movement. In Mexico started, and instead of the X, because in Mexico the X has a very different connotation when we use it to a person, they start using the E, Latina, the letter E. But also it's just an academic universities and so on and so forth. The rest of the country don't even pay attention to that. It's like here, the other one is the Pew Institute, the research they did, and where they found that 98.7% of Latinos in the country disagree with the usage of Latinx. I think those are two very, very valid tools to say, please stop using it. But if your publication is catered to students, college students, I will suggest keep using Latinx. Now, if the publication goes and the intent is to reach out to parents, then they use Latinx.
Yeah, that's the crux of the issue, because Juntos incorporates both high school middle school students and their families. So you have the younger, the high school and middle school and college students who might prefer Latinx, and their parents and grandparents may not prefer it. So I can understand Juntos, at least your
Probably
work and
because
their
I
point.
wouldn't use Latinx at all.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay.
That would be my suggestion. And you have two very well defined points and reasons why not to use it. But
Thank
I mean,
you.
the final decision is up to you. Somebody else had Diana.
Diana Reyes with OSU Extension as well. So Chris kind of asked the question that I had, is something similar. So in the past, I've heard Latinx used for to be inclusive for the LGBTQ+ community. And so I don't know if that's kind of like the proper term usage. In the past, that's what I've, heard.
That's where it started, and that's where it's mainly used, and that's when most people see it as be useful for. But outside that community, people don't see any other reason why to use it.
And I come previously from managing social media for Everett Community College north of Seattle, and this was really an issue for us of also respecting what the students wanted to do in terms of the student-run social media platforms and other marketing material. The students felt very passionate and adamant about using Latinx. So I think it was an understanding for the college that we would continue to support that. But of course, parents are different.
Yeah. Dara Monifa Cooper, she asks, are there any free resources, organizations available for Spanish translations? Not that I know of. My unit offered translations, but unfortunately we do charge an hourly fee, unfortunately. And but I don't know any. I mean, Google is doing it, is getting better and better, but still, when it comes to certain cultural aspects, it's going to translate literally, and you might miss that part, important cultural part of the message. So that's why I not suggest to do it as for that. If it is for something that is not that relevant, that is not going to go to the specific community, because what happens is, if you do and take that route in order to save some money, you are going to make believe and feel your community, the community that you want to gain their trust, like an afterthought. They don't value your money or the investment of you or your time and money to do something properly.
And at first it may seem a little safe enough to use. Some of these free options seem safe, but in a previous role, I had advised a department not to use Google Translate and some other free versions that they were using. And on a very specific career night, they decided that they would use it and communicate with Spanish speakers. And speaking to what Ricardo was mentioning about those just words that don't necessarily translate, they ended up translating something in Spanish that basically said, no worries, across the parking lot, you are able to find kids with weed. And, now I tell the story and it's a bit funny, right? But we had an issue. We had a serious issue there. And again, that's what Google Translate will do.
Yeah,
I can imagine that it's also quite offensive to actual Spanish speakers when they can tell that you're using some of those automated services. So that's not something, but everywhere people need translations. So I'm still wondering if there's an organization that maybe is getting funding from somewhere to be able to provide those services.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't know of any. And, like you said, sometimes you can get away with it because the message is so simple and so clear. But oftentimes, you need to have a more direct cultural message to the community. And trust me, I mean, the other day I was, someone sent me a PowerPoint to review, and we translated the text. My unit translated the text. So they sent me the PowerPoint to see, and I'm looking at it, and I said, "Wow, are you?" My first reaction was very like Latino, right? I see. These are the images you're putting this text with, because I don't see any brown person in here. I don't see any reflection of Latinos, even though we come in all shapes, sizes, and colors. This is specifically, and that was exactly. They sent me the PowerPoint or whatever they were using, the images they were using. They use for the general public per se, And I said, you need to change this because it looks like, it makes me feel as a Latino like I'm just an afterthought of that. You're not putting the effort to really contact me, get to me as a person. And so that happens with the translations as well. We have another comment, Susan Chief. This was very helpful. Thank you. We would like to recruit more Hispanic students and wonder if you have best practices on how to reach potential students and parents and how to ensure they feel welcome and part of the campus community. I think Dora has more on that. She has been working with a couple of colleges and universities.
Yeah, I think something that really worked well for us at Everett was being able to, we learned that if we made information sessions to try to recruit these parents and these students, we made it a little too formal, we didn't get as much participation as if we made it into more of a celebration that incorporated culture aspects. And we ended up developing something called Noche Latina, and we ran the event twice a year, and it became a family event. We didn't say the student and the parent, we said bring the entire family. So kind of that approach of inclusiveness of everybody that surrounds the students as a community is important. So that would be my suggestion. I would also use specifically for Spanish speaking parents, Facebook as a vehicle to try to get to them, whether it's Facebook events. That continues to work pretty strong.
Another thing that I would like to add to this, sometimes when you want to communicate and you think of the Latino community and you think, well, we have to do it in Spanish. Not necessarily. Think twice, look twice at the people you want to connect, because you can very well do it in English. And if it is to the students, you can do it in English. If it is to the parents, most likely I will suggest do it in Spanish. However, depends on if the community where you live. There's already, as I said, in Florida, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, all the Southwest. They have 4th, 5th generation of Latinos who they're bilingual. And they appreciate it much either if you speak to them in Spanish or English, as long as it's culturally, the message is, conveyed in a cultural manner. That's the key of success. Dara, you have another question.
Yeah, it was more so like, are there social media platforms outside of the YouTube and the Facebook and the Instagram and the TikTok and the WhatsApp that the Latino community uses that aren't the mainstream? Like, are there any that are specific to Latino?
Not that I'm aware of. WhatsApp is a very strong use by the Latino families specifically.
Yeah, I would recommend, there's obviously, Latinos also use Medium. They also use Reddit at a 10%. But if you don't have that next door as well. If you don't have the bandwidth really, and I find this a lot in speaking to folks trying to reach Latinos or any other community for that matter, is stick to the ones where you're going to find most of them, because really that's really your best chance at actually communicating. But yes, if you want to look at Reddit and Nextdoor, that's also those are also two platforms where Latinos are engaged. I wouldn't say highly engaged, but engaged.
You
You
know what?
said Reddit and Nextdoor.
And Nextdoor it's an issue, right, for like say community college or education. Education based institutions, because there's a lot of privacy issues there. But I think Nextdoor is going to evolve to allow us to participate in a different way.
And the top three in terms of the social media again were YouTube, Facebook, and was it Instagram or WhatsApp?
Instagram.
In Instagram, yes.
Okay, and then WhatsApp came after.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
TikTok is getting there.
Yeah.
Okay.
For all the right reasons or wrong reasons. You know, one medium that is very popular and get the message across very effective is the monthly newspapers that you find in the grocery stores. Try to connect to them when you send them anything that you want published. Most likely is going to be published. Those are mini operations, most likely underfunded, and they welcome any kind of content. But also they have, because they're free, they're at the door of the supermarket and so on and so forth, people do pick them up and do read them as well. So that's a good way to connect with the Latino community as large. It's not an alternative newspapers, these are monthly newspapers, rags, whatever you want to call it. They're in every Latino community. They have sometimes they call, normally they're going to have the name of the community, but they're so easy to identify. They're just right by the entrance of the mom and pop store or the grocery store that most Latino visit. Any other question?
Well, I'd like to thank you again, Ricardo and Doralicia, for joining us today. This has been a really interesting and I think well-received topic, and I appreciate you taking the time out of your day, and then the rest of you for taking the time out of your day to join us. Next month on March 17th, at the same time, we will have another webinar on how to build a successful social media campaign. So be watching for invites to that.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.